think you're a wonderful addition to the channel, Jacob. You haven't escaped these WhatsApp revelations. You and your family also got dragged into them. How did you feel when... It's a horrible sensation when you know that private correspondence has been given not only to somebody that you didn't send it to in the first place, but the nation.
Well, no, I think if you're in public life, you must expect that things about you come out into the public arena. You end up leading a public life in all ways. You can't say, oh, that's private and so on. I think public figures mustn't be too squeamish about what's written about them. I'm very against the creeping privacy laws that we've got, actually another thing from the human rights courts, because I believe in freedom of speech. And if I've done something or I've said something, people should be entitled to report it. And bear in mind, politicians spend most of their time, particularly if you look at the WhatsApp things, Matt Hancock, trying to get a good impression of themselves. It's only fair that when there's something critical, that's printed.
But what's come out, we always knew there's a preoccupation with MPs in terms of their appearance and how they come across to the public. But the volume was turned up on that particular ambition during that period of time. Is that something which is exclusive to Matt Hancock more than the other politicians?
I think Matt takes it to an extreme. My view in government is that if you do the right thing, if you do a good job, you will get good PR from it. And that is much more important than painting yourself orange, as some politicians do, to try and appear good.
When we read these WhatsApps, Jacob, it reminds us all of how many extraordinary powers a small group of men decided to take for themselves. It was called the Quad. I just remind myself it was Michael Gove, the Prime Minister Boris, Rishi Sunak and Matt Hancock. Parliament often had very little scrutiny. Should that be allowed again?
Well, not only Parliament, but the Cabinet.
Quite.
I was in the Cabinet at the time, and I didn't know that Chris Whitty was saying that we could perfectly safely reduce the quarantining period to 3 days.
No.
Otherwise, I would have been saying, well, why aren't we doing this?
But how did you not know? I knew that. Like, the information was there for anybody that wanted to find it.
That wasn't what was being briefed to the Cabinet. We were getting that the decision had been made, that it was going to remain, or then it was finally reduced under great pressure. But the enthusiasm for locking people up was something that was not shared with the rest of the Cabinet, or the evidence.
So what happened then if you fought back against that during that period of time? If you really tried to make your voice heard to say, this is wrong, what we're doing here, we're going to be paying the price for this, we need a full cost-benefit analysis. Who is looking at the cost of locking down the NHS and making it a COVID-only service?
It was decided by the Quad, and I think the then-Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, was making the case for easing lockdowns. When I spoke to Boris during this period, I was inevitably making the case for easing lockdowns, but I wasn't in the Quad. There were Cabinet discussions, but by the time we got to those discussions, most of the decisions had already been made. We had a pre-Cabinet briefing for those of us who weren't in the Quad, basically to tell us what had been decided.
The result was, apart from all the issues with mental health and civil liberty, a calamitous impact, Jacob, on the economy.
I agree. I mean, we must never do this again. When it first started, I was not in favour of emergency legislation. I was in favour of using the Civil Contingencies Act, which has much greater parliamentary scrutiny and happens on a UK-wide basis rather than the devolved authorities. The devolved stuff was ridiculous. You couldn't, if you lived on the Welsh border, you were at risk of going into Wales and being arrested, and caused great confusion, and even travel arrangements were separate through the devolved authorities. It should have been done on a UK-wide basis under the Civil Contingencies Act, and then it would have required very regular parliamentary votes, whereas we had 6 monthly votes to decide whether to extend it or not.